disc after that. You keep a record and so on. So I think it's not like the old days when you didn't have things like this. Anyway, any questions? So I think we'll try to get through Genesis tonight. Now that way our exam will be on Genesis, okay? And I'll give you 2 out of 3 questions, and you'll see what you can do with them. And then we'll move on to Exodus. I think I want to read Joshua, Judges, and then we'll speed up. Genesis is the most difficult because it has the most stories. And once you've mastered the techniques of Genesis, you can pretty much go through the rest of the Bible, deal with those issues and then some other ones. And then I'll move to the prophets. It's in the outline, but we'll do Amos is the first written prophet. And you'll be happy to know, I think he's authentic. I don't think he's been written by someone else. And I think you really have a 700 BC text there. 730, 740, 750 BC. So it's really got something that's, I think, reliable. Written by the person who's written by and so on. Micah, Hosea. Micah's more problematic because it repeats a lot of material in Isaiah, so it's difficult to say which came first. Isaiah is multiple parts, and there's even a break in the middle that someone puts on historical material you find from, I think, Kings or Chronicles. And you'll see when you read it. And so most people don't know that. And the historical material in the middle is a repeat of some material in Kings or Chronicles. And that partitions it, and the second part, starting around chapter 40, is clearly by a much later author. It's a new author, very different from the earlier material. So Isaiah really is a double, triple book, even though most people just speak about Isaiah as if he's one person. And we'll finish up with Ezekiel. So I think that will be a very good taste of the Bible. Then after that, when you're by yourself, you can read the rest of it. When you feel like it. I don't even think I've read the whole recently or any serious way for years and years and years. I read through it, but when you're young and you read it, it isn't really the same as when you're more mature. I don't know if I could get through Leviticus and Deuteronomy very easily. Yeah.
I don't know really anything about the Dead Sea Scrolls. I know you work on them. Can you give a summation of what that's taught?
No, I don't think, maybe on a break I'll tell you about it. It's a waste of class time. But I would just say that the Dead Sea Scrolls are documents found along the Dead Sea in 1947, theoretically, although it may have been earlier. The Bedouin people who were involved in it don't necessarily give you a straightforward presentation. Anyway, 47, 48 is a good enough time frame. Within the time of the Arab-Israeli First World War, almost like a miracle. And it turned out there were, after a lot of haggling and hassling and excavating and breaks and so on, over the next 10 years, they found 11 different caves that had manuscripts in them. And ultimately there were, I think about 2,600 different texts that were found, pieces of them, not full. Some were full Isaiah scroll, and from basically the time of Christ, 1st century BC or 1st century AD, something like that. So it's, and a lot of texts we never saw before. Crazy, wild, exciting, interesting texts. Every book of the Bible is there except Esther. Maybe Nehemiah, though Nehemiah was considered to be part of Ezra at that time, and Ezra is there, so probably Nehemiah is, if we had the whole thing. A lot of it's just in bits and pieces. But every book of the Bible has been found. Every important book of the Bible. I just mentioned Deuteronomy. That seems to have been the book they were most interested in. They liked Deuteronomy of all the law books the most. There's something like 27 different copies of Deuteronomy. And a lot of copies of Isaiah, and a lot of texts we never saw before, which is what I work on, which are probably about the Messianic movement in Palestine in the first century, and therefore, in my view, if not in others, contradict what Christianity tells us about the first century. And that's the controversy. Because what Christianity tells us in the Gospels are probably not native Palestinian documents. The proof would be that they're written in Greek. And they were written probably later by people overseas, probably not even by Jews in many cases, probably in almost all cases. And therefore, they're a little bit anti-Semitic because they're Greek. And they show the signs of that, and they present the Messiah as being a little bit like that too. And that's why we're dealing with that issue in the Western world so much over the centuries and millennia. So putting in a nutshell, that's what the scrolls told me anyway. And that's why unfortunately we deal with Holocaust, because they put some of their mindset into it, and that became for a lot of people God's word, frozen in stone. And I don't think any real Christian wants to hurt anybody. Certainly doesn't want to have a Holocaust on their conscience. I try to encourage all Christians to try to do something about this issue, because you don't want to be tainted by blood guilt in any way. There are people who are involved in this, who are killing little babies, millions of them. And so if any of the documents are tainted in any way, you should see no one ever entertained that before the scrolls. It might be the documents that might be tainted. To my mind, they are. But that's my own personal view, because I see now with the texts in Palestine that are messianic, what the mindset is. That's what I want to say. But you got me talking. Yeah, I'm pretty well known for that. And you can read in my books. I've got another book I'm trying to get finished. It was supposed to be about 500 pages. It's already mushroomed into 850 pages. And my publisher is very angry at me. And he may throw it in the garbage pail if I don't hurry up and get it done. And I'm supposed to have had it done at the end of last month. And I'm still killing myself every day. I know I'm going to collapse. In fact, I'm too old to be doing this stuff. Most of the ideas that I've just talked to you about in that book, and that's called the New Testament Code. The Cup of the Lord, the Damascus Covenant, the Blood of Christ. And they subtitle is Not Me, uncovering the truth about the raising of James to the Dead Sea Scrolls, James, the brother of Jesus, to the Dead Sea Scrolls. I don't like to uncover the truth about anything. Publishers wanted that in, so they put it in. I don't know if that book's going to make it. I'm hoping it is. Anybody wants to volunteer to help us enter data, I'm making corrections on the proofs. But we have about 5 chapters to go. It's very difficult work. And the program you do it in is a program called Quark, because the publishers won't do this because no one's ever given them proofs that are as messy as this. So I've had to polish the work on the proofs. So for instance, the proofs, this first proof's something like that. That's page 692, what I've been working on today. And that's what I do to it. That's a good page. That's a bad page. Because it wasn't polished. But it's pretty clear because I'm making it clear for anyone. But I can't be doing the corrections on the proofs and putting this stuff in at the same time. So Quark is pretty easy to work. I mean, the only difficult thing about Quark, if you have a Mac, you can load the thing right in with all the fonts. If you have an IBM, it takes a little, I have the fonts, but it takes a little, the fonts that are being used on that, but it takes a little bit of doing to unzip the fonts and load them in. And that's the only tricky thing about that. But anyone who wants to, who feels they can do precise work and is willing to put those corrections in, could certainly use some help on that, actually. So if you feel good at computers and want to help out, I could use help on that since you asked. Because otherwise, I can't give those proofs to the publishers. I can't show them what I've done to their proofs. What I can show them is a corrected proof, let them give me back a second proof that I've given them back on a corrected proof. And then they won't know how awful it is. What first, because they don't read things. Publishers can't read. There's nobody in their office that can possibly read that book. It's way beyond what they would understand or could comprehend. These are people who, are used to, I can't tell you what, but they can't read a serious manuscript. And they certainly can't read anything on this subject. But you work on this, you learn a lot, I'll tell you that. You learn everything I know. But it has to be precise, you have to be willing to do it. It takes, to go through one of those chapters, it takes about, I would say probably about 20 hours to go through a chapter, maybe 30 pages or something. I've only got about 5 left, so I haven't finished. I mean, I'm on one chapter. I'm just about going to finish tonight. I thought I could do 10 pages today, and I could only do 5. I thought I could do 10 pages yesterday, I only did 4. That's what it's all about. I got these proofs last November, and it's now almost October. And that's how long it's taken me just to go through the proofs. But putting the corrections in isn't so difficult. And so actually, it's learning a good skill because Quark, I didn't even know there was such a program, is the program all publishing companies use to put the manuscript into its final form. So it's really pretty exciting to be able to master that. So, as I said, if you want to talk to me after the break or afterwards, I'd be used 2 or 3 people to help us out. And then, so the rest as far as the scrolls go, I think the main thing is that the Bible manuscripts they have more or less agree with the ones we have. I mean, in content. There's occasional different reading here or there, but what's impressive is, I'm not talking about the New Testament because we don't have New Testament documents there. But what's impressive is that the Bible we have that came down mostly through Judeo-Christian hands, this Bible we're using is a Catholic Bible, but the Protestants use actually a Jewish Bible. That was part of the Reformation, to go to the original source, not to go to the church to find out what the reading should be. And the Catholic Bible is based on a Greek translation, the Septuagint, which was done in Egypt around the 1st or 2nd century BC. So it has more books. That's why we have extra books here. But that doesn't mean it's it's not as accurate as the Jewish one. But in some cases, the reading of the Greek Bible, which is really the Greek Bible, is closer to the Dead Sea Scrolls reading of a given passage. But most of, I would say 95% of the readings follow what they call the Masoretic text, the rabbinic text. The earliest one of those they had was done in Syria in the 10th century AD. So this is older by 10 centuries. These documents are older by 10 centuries than any Hebrew manuscript we have of the Old Testament. But I don't work so much on the biblical manuscripts because the biblical manuscripts are, as I said, more or less the same, an occasional difference here or there. And we know those. What interests me is those documents we never saw before, things that they consider to be holy and relevant. And that's, to interpret those has been the issue. Yeah.
Just a quick question. So like books like the Tobit and the Maccabees, they're not in the Dead Sea, part of the Dead Sea Scrolls?
No.
Those are...
No, but books that you've never heard of, well, Tobit is, I think, Maccabees is. Some books are, some books aren't. There's not a Bible there. You've got, scrolls. Every book here in the Bible is a scroll. So basically, somebody sat down and put them together as a book, ultimately. And that was done after the war against Rome in the final form that we have it. So the Jews did it because, in a way, they thought that the manuscripts were going to disappear or be lost. Rabbis who survived the war against Rome, which there's a series now on HBO called Rome. I mean, it's a popular soap opera version of the events surrounding Caesar and Mark Antony and the civil wars in Rome, but it's done from a soap opera lower level, following characters who are. It's pretty good because it's about Rome, but you see how brutal the times were, and you can well understand how they would have pulverized, decimated, completely crushed a messianic movement, which is what they did. And our gospel New Testament material are materials that were acceptable to them to some extent, not completely obviously, but to some extent, were not, and written by people who were not pulverized. But most of the people who were part of the Messianic movement in Palestine were pulverized. And that's what the scrolls are. They represent a literature that everyone who wrote it was killed. Nobody could come back to get it because nobody could have. Because the documents were very valuable. They were written on parchment, and anyone who knew about them would have certainly later on, when there was better times, would come back with a wheelbarrow and get them. That means every single person who had any knowledge of them was killed or was unable to get back because they had been transported somewhere so far away as slavery or something else that there was no way they could ever get back. I think that the people who committed suicide on a place called Masada, you may have heard of that, 30 miles south of the Dead Sea Scrolls, I think that's where most of them went and killed themselves when they were under siege. I think that's the people who ultimately did write these documents, and I don't think many people did survive to tell the tale. Certainly, as I said, no one survived who came who could come back. So what it is that you have a time capsule of literature that's come back to haunt us from the past, a picture of the times, more authentic than anything that we ever had before, because it didn't go through any editorial processes of the Roman Empire or anything afterwards, and it wasn't written. It wasn't written after the events in question. It was really written before the events in question. So the Bible, and again, back to the books of the Bible, yeah, there are books in the Apocrypha there, like Tobit, I think is there. But there are also books you've never heard of, but I mean, seen. Enoch, for instance, very book found in multiple copies. Jubilees, book found in multiple copies. They clearly saw that as part of their Bible. So why didn't it get into our Bible? Well, because the rabbis who compiled this thing after the fall of the temple were very upset about the war. Sort of like the Sunni authorities in Iraq today. They're very upset about the war, and they blamed the revolutionaries for the disaster that had happened. Therefore, they really did get rid of all the books they considered to be incendiary, and compiled a fairly well, it's not mild, but a pretty harmless document, if you want to call it that, in terms of revolutionary behavior patterns. And books like the Maccabee books they considered to be insightful, and therefore they chucked them out. They didn't like the Maccabees. And that weird, Jews celebrate Hanukkah, Christians don't. The Christians, Catholics have the Maccabee books, and Jews don't. So that's how contradictory things can get because of these kind of contradictions. Yeah, that's what you wanted me to talk about, huh? You're a tricky guy. Yeah.
For the books you said that were added, or you said that were not there, were like Enoch. Was it like the?
What do you mean not there? Not in our Bible.
I mean the that you found.
They're there. Yeah, they're there in multiple
Was it
copies.
like first, second? I just was reading that. First, second, third Enoch, or was
Oh, there's a lot. You'll have to study it up because you have to look at the parallels. I think mostly it's fourth Enoch that's there, but I'm not a big Enoch specialist. A lot of the Enoch books came down through Ethiopian sources and Syriac Christian, or I don't know where the different churches they found these things, mostly in Ethiopia, things like that. And the document that was found does not agree with the Dead Sea Scroll copy, only parts of it were found in the scrolls. But that's the whole work. You can look online, that's been edited, the Enoch materials. You can look at the parallels to what you're reading and see what's there and what isn't there. Mostly it's, I think, the fourth part of Enoch that is in the scrolls. Jubilees is all there. And they used a calendar that was like Jubilees. Anyway, I don't want to get into all that. It's another area. But if you're reading Enoch, it's fine. Enoch fits in with the Daniel literature. Now, you see, the Jews treated Daniel different than the Christians because Christianity comes out of documents of this Messianic movement, I think. I mean, just because I say it's written overseas by people who maybe not the same mindset as in Palestine. Paul is the best representative of that mindset, and his literature, his letters form the basis of theology and Christianity as we know it. We don't have letters from Jesus. We have sayings that are supposed to be related to Jesus, but you know, I would hate to see what people said I said in my class 100 years later to some group. So. You know, they didn't have tape recorders around then. And when you look at the gospel stories, I know they're very attractive books and people base their whole lives on them, and I'm not saying anyone should not. I'm saying that don't think that you're necessarily dealing with historical material there completely, if even in large part. Because you see, the literature is full of miracles, and, you know, superstitious sort of things like exorcism, turning, you know, evil spirits, you know, putting them into swine, going off hilltops. That's not the stuff of literature in Palestine in the first century. That's Hellenistic literature overseas. And I know that's painful to a lot of people because they love all those stories, because children like all those stories, and you grow up with them as a child, and you always love what you had as a child. Everyone loves what they had as a child. It's the normal way people are. And Paul even says that when I was a child, I saw things as a child. As through a glass darkly, I think he puts it. And when I grew up, I put away childish things. And unfortunately, there's something of that involved in this process, not belief systems. You can take the Christian ethic and be a Christian because you like what the ethic is. Doesn't necessarily mean that the documents that presented are reliable historical documents about what the teacher in Palestine said about everything. As I said, Paul is a very reliable bit of material, and he doesn't know anything about Jesus. He only knows one particular event, that he was crucified at some point. That's all he knows. And the rest of it he gets from supernatural visions he has of Christ Jesus in heaven, what he calls apocalypsios. Apocalypsios is the Greek word for vision. I'm not going to rely on the vision that Paul had, frankly, because I'm not sure he's totally sane. That's just my personal view. In fact, I'm convinced he isn't. But a lot of people like him, and he's been liked for thousands of years. So I'm a minority of one among 10 billion people. So don't listen to me. 10 billion people think differently, and so you have to decide where you want to be in your life, and you take what is useful to you. But the reason I have the views I do is because of the scrolls. So, scrolls showed me that, oh, this is what Messianism in Palestine was. And the material is very much like John the Baptist, actually. In fact, there's material in there that relates directly to John the Baptist, but it's nothing like the gospel material in terms of ethos. It is, John the Baptist is presented as a very aggressive person even in the Gospels, and that's true. The scrolls are militant and aggressive, and you have water baptism, and you have immersion, and you have even Holy Spirit ideology and things like that. But after that, it's 180 degrees reversed, and that is, you don't get turning the other cheek, you don't get loving your enemies, you don't get anything like that in the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Dead Sea Scrolls say, hate the sons of the pig. These are really militant documents of very aggressive messianism. And what they're doing is preparing for the final war against all evil on the earth. I mean, that's absolutely what they're doing. Well, Christians are in a way too, but that's been sort of otherworldlyized, pacified as it went through this Hellenistic I hate to say ringer, but metamorphosis. Yeah.
I've gone to the bookstore and looked at that stuff, and I just wonder, is there like a good book that has like all the text and like these were the ones that they found, and here's the text you can read, and you translate it in English?
Well, there's one. The guy was here the other day. He's written a book, the Dead Sea Scroll Bible. He's got all the text from the Dead Sea, and he's corrected the regular text from that. And he was here just the other day giving lectures on the campus. There were signs all over the place. He's an expert on that. So that's one book you could look at if you're interested in biblical texts, that how they're looked at in the scrolls.
It's called, what's the name of it?
Dead Sea Scrolls Bible.
Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yeah. Anyway, I know you'd rather talk about this than what we're talking about, playing him. But I go back to work, we're already, anyway. Isaac goes from youth to old age pretty quickly, as we saw. Jacob goes off because of problems with Esau. Then Jacob starts to bear children with several wives and then handmaidens. And finally, he comes and leaves with all his group. And we have this in chapter 31, more, I think, line 43 onwards. Laban and Jacob are presented as making a treaty, just like earlier. I think Abraham and Abimelech were, and Isaac and Abimelech, and then I think this is pretty old stuff, but how it got into this narrative would be something difficult to describe, I think. But it's a place at Mizpah, because we want to put line 49, a watchman between us, and the God of Abraham, line 53, and the God of Nahor, judge between us. And then there's another place just before he goes in, after in 32, after Laban goes home, 32, 2 or 3 there, a place that he camps, and angels, just like before when he left, are coming to meet him, these things. I think this is another shrine called Mahanaim. I think the authors get this from people who keep these shrines. Oh, this shrine, this commemorates where Jacob had his passage, and he saw angels before he entered into the Holy Land. And just because that's a tradition of a shrine, I don't think that means that Jacob literally saw angels came into the Holy Land. That's the way people thought back in those days. So our narrators picked the tradition. So that's how I would see it. Now, maybe he literally did. People take this as the Word of God, would think that every word in it is totally, has to be true in some fashion. And, I'm not one of those people who feels that you have to push the text, as beyond what it can bear. Anyway, when he does come in, it's one of these things in 32. Well, we have another shrine here, and it's very slow here, 31. Peniel. And because El is God, Pen means face, I have seen God face to face. In another tradition, it seems, another town they knew. And I'm not looking at the different text lines here so much, because it really would be difficult to separate all this out at this point. But I'm sure these are all text shrine places that are from different text lines, but what they are, you may be able to sort out. You're studying it more closely at the moment than I am. And so, once again in 33 though, just like Ishmael earlier, and even Dinah, not what I'm talking about, Hagar, Dinah's coming up, Dinah's coming up. Hagar earlier, even though she's not presented as wonderful, neither are the patriarchs. And Esau, again, though he was been portrayed negatively previously for some unknown reason, he didn't do anything wrong, really, except he didn't care about his birthright. And he was, actually, his brother was a little bit of a scoundrel for trying to take advantage of his bad state. So Jacob isn't presented as someone marvelous here. And again, Jacob is sure that Esau is going to be angry at him. And we're all brothers and sisters, or many of us anyway in this world. And we all have these feelings and worries about our siblings. I still have it myself at my age. I've got problems with my brother. And I never know what to make of what he's going to do next towards me. And it's really odd. It's just like when I was 5 years old. So these things will hardly change. So these are universal themes that people have to deal with their whole lives. So that's why it's so appealing to people. So this is another place here. Look at this. Anyway, Esau's presented as really generous. Brother, line 9, I have plenty. Keep what's yours. I don't need all these gifts. You don't have to bribe me. I am happy to see you. I only wanted to win your favor. Jacob said in line 16. Anyway, notice this 17. He goes to a place called Sukkot, and he builds a house. Well, Sukkot is the Jewish name for tabernacles, and that holiday is coming up at the end of this month, Sukkot. Religious Jews take it out, take off that 8 days, but they've reinterpreted it to mean the booths that children of Israel dwelt in the wilderness in. But here you see it's just a name of a place in which Jacob kept his livestock, because it means booths. And I guess that you put your livestock out of the bad weather in a shelter of some kind, a booth, want to call it, the tabernacle or whatever. So there's another. And then we have these names. And I'm not doing the overlaps. Here he comes to Shechem again, line 18. That's where Abraham came on his return from Paddan Aram. There were two names from where he went, wasn't it? One was Paddan Aram, and the other was Aram Naharaim. Remember that? And this is probably an L text, I think, here. He erected an altar again in Shechem because he called it El, God of Israel. Israel meaning, El. That's certainly an Elohist text there. And look here. I mean, I think Abraham founded shrines there in Shechem or in Bethel several times in the narrative earlier, didn't he? But those were kind of Yahwish sort of shrines, I think, that the text had. This is a Jacob El shrine. But anyway, whatever happens, I think these all are traditions relating to these different shrines. That doesn't mean that it's new material. It's probably quite old material. Whether it's reliable is for you to decide. So since we're talking about Shechem here, line 19, let's tell another story about Shechem. What happens here at Shechem? Where is Shechem, by the way? Shechem is north of Jerusalem on the spine of the Palestinian hill line. Shechem is an area that's supposed to go back to the Palestinians for their state. It's really crazy. All the areas that the Israelites lived in now are primarily the Palestinian areas. And all the areas that the Canaanites lived in are now primarily the Israelite areas in terms of modern politics. So that's why we're having all this problem with the settlers. The settlers are trying to reclaim the land because they're biblically minded. And they say, well, this is, promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's the reason we came back here. And the Arabs say, hey, we don't know anything about that. You guys are just interlopers, get out of here. We're going to kill you if you come here. We're going to cut your throats and so on and so forth. I think that the Jews would be quite willing to live at peace with the Arabs in these areas. Because, they both benefit economically from this, but people there feel threatened in some way and get very hostile and aggressively bloody about it. I know that's a one-sided view, but if you have a different view that you can convince me of, that Jews want to cut Arabs' throats, I've never seen any evidence of it. Now they're getting to that point because they've had so much bloodletting. So there's some extremists maybe now. There never were that I ever encountered the last 50 years that I've known this area. So, even the Bible, blood begets blood and stuff like that, so maybe now it's getting that way, but it certainly wasn't that way before. And the bloodletting was really all one way as far as cutting people's throats went. If the Israelis wanted to expel everyone from these areas, they could have done it like that. And they could have done it like that. They could have done it in 1947, they could have done it in 1967, and they could have done it in 1973. They could still do it. So if they were really bloody-minded, people don't realize that. If they're really bloody-minded, nothing. There would be no problem at all. No, they're actually quite tolerant given the provocation that they have to deal with. But they're portrayed terribly. My son said he just came back from Ecuador. And people were pointing at him because he had a Hebrew name, and they were saying, Judah, 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 Jew, 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 Jew. And they were all anti-Israel in Ecuador. Now, how they got to be anti-Israel in Ecuador, is beyond just from the television, watching the daily presentation and the constant, harping on these issues on the TV and identifying with oppressed minorities as it's presented. So this has gotten extremely widespread and pretty frightening to me personally as how people's minds develop. Here are the materials, and Shechem is a place that and they have tried to settle Shechem, some people, but they haven't tried to push anyone out of Shechem. In fact, when they go to a place, they cultivate it and usually pick deserted places and build homes and start farms or vineyards or whatever it is, settlements on those places, and they're usually pretty thriving. As you see in the Gaza the stuff that they blew up and left was extremely modern, kind of place with trees, and they didn't throw anyone out of anything to build those things. That was just wasteland when they got them. When they started up on it, now everybody wants it. So to some extent, that's one of the problems. In any case, Shechem is an area that is going to go back to the Palestinians, but as you see, it's a holy area for these people who take the Bible seriously. I don't have an answer to these things. What happened here? Well, it's a story about how, notice how Israel is, Jacob is called Israel mostly here. Shechem, line 7, had insulted Israel by raping Jacob's daughter. And Shechem is both a person and a city, just like in northern Syria. And Hamor. I told you about Stephen's speech where he talks about buying the field that Abraham bought from someone, the son of Hamor, or something like that, where Stephen makes that incredibly misinformed mistake. I don't want to call it a blooper, that's for you to decide. I would, in an unpolite conversation, maybe refer to it like that. And it just shows the person writing that hadn't read his Bible very carefully. I mean, I don't think Stephen even existed himself, and I don't think he ever made a speech like that, but that's another long story. Read my James, a Brother of Jesus book, and you'll see why Stephen never existed, and who Stephen is an overwrite. There are overwrites there. There are things that are overwritten over other stories that we can tell and we know about. And then the editors overwrite them with something more attractive to their audience, just like a Hollywood scriptwriter would do. So anyway, that's another study, hardly, and best, we got enough trouble with this text. Anyway, it's another, actually this looks like an Elohist story, even though it's quite a good story, it's an attractive story. Anything that have to do with sex and circumcision and stuff like that people like. It's pretty earthy. And this is a rape. And it's the vengeance that Jacob's sons take. Jacob is willing to make a treaty with Shechem, 13. They want, it's one of these like, I just saw a thing on Discovery Channel about kidnapping brides out in Kyrgyzstan and Tashkent in Central Asia. You know, in large parts of the world, it's a fine to kidnap women and try to force them to marry you. That's part of the marriage process. And something like that is going on here. That they've tried to, I think, it's a kidnap marriage, raping her, but it's a kidnap marriage because he says, well, we want to marry her. It's okay. There's no problem. Even though rape is theoretically taking place, it's a rape by people who want to marry her. But Jacob is willing to sort of, he doesn't want trouble. As usual, Jacob's always very slippery and cagey. But he's got some sons here who are not prepared to do that. They said, we can't give our sister to an uncircumcised man. That would disgrace us. They have to all circumcise themselves if they want to be in our family. Remember, it said anyone traveling with Abraham and so on. So they went so far even to agree to that. Again, it's not a good story about the Israelites. It's more, so the Shechemites aren't innocent either. They rape people and they want to marry them. On the other hand, Jacob's sons are going to, as Jacob finally says it, you put me in a bad smell among these people. Because when they're, after they agree to do all this, the whole town, line 24, on the third day, as I told you, it's not very easy for grown-up people to do this sort of thing when they're still all in pain, 2 of his sons. And we're going to see how each of the sons becomes disqualified as we move along here in the narrator's presentation from being the principal person, if you want. Though Levi is an important son in terms of the priesthood. Anyway, we don't think of this as a very priestly story. So Simeon and Levi took their swords, 25, and went through the camp, the town, and killed all the males. Because they had done this. Well, I think you'd get that in the Middle East today, if in some areas. I think it could happen under the Al-Qaeda regime. So this is not necessarily new behavior for the modern Middle East either. That's very, anyway, and they pillaged the place, and they took the flocks, and they carried off all what there was. They looted everything. And Jacob said to his son Simeon Levi, "You have done me harm. You put me in a bad odor or smell or a bad reputation with the people of this land, the Canaanites, the Perizzites. And look, I'm weak. I don't have a lot of people, and they will unite and destroy us." They said, "Is our sister to be treated like a whore, a prostitute?" That's the end of the story. That's quite a good story, even though it's pretty nasty. Don't you think? It's a memorable story. So they go to Bethel, and that's, we all know, that's the way Abraham went down, Shechem to Bethel. And that's where Bethel means house of God, northern God. And they put an altar there, but God had already put it. There was an altar already put there several times by Abraham, if you recall. So again, that's where God appeared to you when you were fleeing your brother Esau. So I don't know, you can try to count up the number of altars that were stuck down here in Bethel in various points of the narrative. And so this narrative does not hang historically very well, as a sequential thing. It's pieces taken from different traditions. So that's not so bad. At least one thing they haven't done is they haven't rewritten it. See, the Gospels, I believe, have been rewritten. But these are, I'll give them credit for that. They just took what they had and kept it. They stitched it together, but they didn't alter it. This is the tradition we have. Even though it contradicts another thing, too bad. And again, I can't cut it up as easily as I did the earlier stuff. Now Jacob gets some promises here. When he builds an altar to God at Bethel, again, that's the shrine of the north. And he had wrestled there. And finally, he took the idols that his wife had taken and buried them under the oak tree. That's for sure a tradition of the shrine under the oak tree at Shechem. Oh, hello, traveler, worshiper. You know what we have here under this tree here? The idols that Rachel took when she came. By the way, that shows these stories are quite old. The stories about Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and so on. Because if a shrine there is not a recent shrine, and they have these traditions associated with that shrine, that means that the traditions probably go back another 500 years before that. So these things may actually have had something like this may have actually. People are already commemorating it in an oral way before it even gets written down. You follow what I'm trying to say? So if you have a shrine where they say, "Hey, see that oak tree here? Well, when was that shrine?" I don't think it can be much later than the Joshua period or the David period, before the temple was built in Bethel. So if you had a shrine there, some kind, and the priest there said, "Oh, well, we have the idols that Rachel took from her house." That's very old. That's very old. So there's very old material here. It's just been put together by some editors in an interesting fashion. Okay, and then now another weird thing happens. As he was leaving Bethel, where God had appeared to him 7, Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died. That's another tradition, I'm sure, associated with the oak tree at Bethel. And now here's someone else. Another story. Oh, you know why the oak tree here is called the Oak of Tears? Because Rebekah's nurse died there. I mean, I don't even think we ever heard of Rebekah's nurse before this, did we? I didn't even know Rebekah had a nurse. I thought Rebekah was brought up in northern Syria someplace. You follow me? I mean, what? When she came with Isaac, she brought her nurse with her? I don't know exactly what's meant by nurse. Servant, maybe? That could be. Anyway, what's she crying about? Because anyone who's buried someplace, usually there's some tears associated with it. Well, God appeared again to him on his return. This is Elois, Padamaran 9:9. Your name is Jacob, but from now on you shall be called not Jacob, but Israel. Accordingly, they named him Israel. Didn't we have that before somewhere? Yeah, different text line. I think when he was leaving for that would have probably been a different text. I can't trace them all. Maybe Mr. Friedman can. So this is another parallel text about how he got his name Israel. God said, I'm El Shaddai. Be fruitful. El Shaddai, that's a Lebanese, Phoenician name for the deity in the area, all-powerful God. Be fruitful and multiply. And Jacob raised a monument, a stone, poured oil, and Jacob named the place Bethel. Come on, 50. How many times has this place been named? Now, how come ancient people who read this text never saw all these things? How come your grandfathers, great-grandfathers, and great-great-grandfathers, and mine too, never saw any of this? I think it's because their minds weren't free. They weren't permitted to. Because anyone who has a free mind can see it very, very quickly. You see what I'm trying to say? You're not allowed to question the text in the tradition that most people grow up in, including maybe my own and yours. And therefore nobody did. Or if they had anything, they would just, well, I just don't understand that. Maybe it's beyond me. You know, it's like Darwinism. Everyone wants to beat down on Darwinism. My son just came back from the Galapagos Islands, and he was showing me the big turtles and different things there, and the finches with different beaks, and all the iguanas that are in the sea, and the ones that are on the land. And he was giving me all the Darwin conclusions from all this, and the way that they adapt to the environment, the adaptations that occur to a isolated environment is what we're seeing there. And you know, that's pretty impressive evidence for the way the species developed. I said I didn't think the Old Testament was necessarily against that in terms of evolution, but people took it as a threatening thesis. Well, nowadays, you see, you have a freer mind. It looks like we're getting a lot of monuments and deaths here. We're sort of tying everything up here. Line 16. On their way south from Bethel, Rachel is having another child, and that's Benjamin. And she was dying. So one of the traditions about Benjamin's name, line 18, is that he's called Ben-Oni, the child of my pain, because I'm going to die in childbirth here. And others are, I think that Benjamin is called Benjamin because he's Benjamin, the son of my days. When I was older, I had a son. Yamin is many days when I was older, not son. And I think, of course, the Yamin is probably better than the Oni. But anyway, I don't know where that tradition is about Benjamin being the son of my years. I don't know if we can find it here. So Rachel, whose other son was hers? Joseph. Which other son? And so there's two sons of Rachel, and she died. Notice where she's buried. Ephratah in Bethlehem. You read the prophets and they say, in Bethlehem, Ephratah, there will be born a son, and so on and so forth. And that's what Christian presentation considers to be Jesus. And the reason they consider it to be Jesus, Bethlehem Ephratah, is because who was born in Bethlehem Ephratah? It looks like David was born, or he comes from. So again, in the ideology of people, I don't know why they think this. I wouldn't think that because an ancestor came from a place, I had to come from that place, but in people's minds, these things have to have a connection for some reason. In any event, since they want to think of Jesus as a son of David, even though it's 10 centuries have gone by, this too is the place where Rachel is buried. I don't know what all the connections are there to Rachel and David. David comes from there, but this is like 1,000 years before David. But anyway, that's another interesting tradition. And Jacob raised a monument on her grave. And listen to what? This is different from what was had all the other ones. And this is the tomb of Rachel, which is there to this day. Does your Bible say that? Something like that? Well, you know something? And I don't think it's a fake, it's still there. It's still there. It's on the road out of Jerusalem going south on the way to Bethlehem. On the right side of the road, I can just picture it right now, the outskirts of Bethlehem. And in fact, Israeli soldiers guard it with their lives because it's a shrine for Jews who care about Rachel and so on. And it's been a shrine for thousands of years. It's not a very big thing, it's just a sort of big round, that's a round thing like this. And let's see if I can, I haven't brought one of those things to write on the board with this time, see if I can find one. Dig down in my Halloween bag, and out comes this. It looks something like this. Like an igloo, really. And inside is one of these cairns. And I told you was in the shrine at Machpelah at Hebron. Do you have a clear view where all these places are? Well, I'll draw you another map in case you don't. I don't say I'm a beautiful map drawer, but here's, I'm not even running, Jerusalem, Shechem. It's all on the same line. Bethel, Bethlehem, and also this means house of lechem is meat or bread. Don't ask me why it's called that. And right here is Rachel's tomb. Later on, we'll hear about Joseph's tomb here. And of course, we've already heard about Abraham's tomb. But except for Jerusalem, which the Jews and Arabs have fought over, and the Jews have been somewhat successful there, almost all the rest of these places, they're still fighting over Hebron, as you know. Almost all the rest of these places are Arab places now. But the Jews have sprinkled settlements all around here, what they call settlement blocks. And the American government, the UN, wants to get them out of there. It's a pretty difficult situation, actually. You're dealing with people who sincerely feel a certain thing. They're not hurting anyone by being there. Why should they be allowed to be? Why should there be segregated areas? I mean, if they can build a place and no one's living there, well, why shouldn't they be able to live there? Why are other people who feel they can murder people? Let a person build and do what he wants wherever he can, sustain himself. And do I say you can't live in Orange County? I mean, what a weird thing. Yet everyone takes it as normal because of all the propaganda. I think it's totally amazing that people are just basically trying to build houses and, a bit like having regional zoning here. We don't want Irvine to grow anymore. We don't want these people to be allowed to go there for sure. We want to keep Irvine small or something like Brentwood or something like that. And we can't have any new people from here there. I mean, this is astonishing to my mind. It's just a matter of enterprise. Let people go wherever they want if they can sustain themselves and flourish. That's what we do in this country, don't we? And that's such a little place. So anyway, to me, so don't even get me on that subject. I'm on the losing side of the argument too. So I really want to show my frustration over that one. So anyway, now you have presumably can remember that. I don't have to draw that map again, I hope, right? You'll remember that. So that it should be starting to get into your head, even though you've never been there. Some of you probably have. How many have been there? So you've seen some of these places, huh? Presumably you've probably been to Hebron. No, that was too difficult.
It depends how, I don't know, like Bethlehem's hard to get to.
Yeah, but in the old days, these were easy places to get to. It's only more recently, and since George Bush, the elder, intervened, and all these peacemakers, all they did was make it more difficult. Because the place was very docile back in the 60s, 70s, and the 80s when I knew it. And now it's like an armed camp. And all they did by doing all this was arm these people to the teeth, brought in all the terrorists into the country, and it created the situation they were all facing. It wasn't. I don't have the weapons in the 80s and 70s. The American government forced the Israelis to arm the Palestinians. And that's why you can't travel to Bethlehem. And, the whole thing is so ludicrous that I can't even begin. That's why I'm not surprised they've made a total botch up of Afghanistan and Iraq, too. I mean, the people who do these things just don't have the in-depth understanding of what's going on. So when they give these terrorists and everyone arms, they don't know that they're actually going to use them. They think they're just going to like put them in their pocket and behave nicely with them. Anyway, forget it. I didn't say anything. So here's another, but okay, that's still there to this day. What day? When was this written? God wrote that? That's still there till this day? No, God didn't write that. A human being wrote that. The only question I have is when? What day? I tell you, it's still there till now. I could have written it today, but when was it written? If I had my guess, I would say in David's time, or Solomon's time, or somewhere, 800. I mean, Friedman is, but somewhere back then, but not way back then. Someone said it's there in my time, the time the guy wrote this. So the question is, when did he write it? Was it written in 2000 BC? No, it wasn't there in 2000 BC. So it was there to this day. And it's been ascribed to Jacob. I can't promise you that is Jacob and his wife's tomb, but that's the tradition. Now here's another thing. We had Reuben and we had Simeon and Levi not doing nice things, right? Now Reuben's going to do something. This is an Elohist tradition, obviously. Israel left and pitched his tent some other place in Migdal Eder. And when he was living there, 21, Reuben went in and mounted his father's couch. Basically, he slept with his father's concubine, Bilhah. And Israel learned of it. That's it. I'm sure there's more to that story than that. That's just a fragment, you see that, of a story. What do you mean Israel learned of it? What did he do about it? What did he say? Was he upset? Was he happy? Was he sad? Did he get angry at Reuben? So that's just not a defect in the text. That's all the narrator knows. It's all the material he has. It's like you sang a song to me, from Leadbelly or Blind Lemon Jefferson or someone back in the plantation days, and I only know a verse. I don't know the whole song. That's what that is, a fragment. And it is referred to later on when Jacob gives the blessing supposedly to his children, and he wants to give Reuben short shrift. Reuben, I'm not going to give you what you deserve because you slept with my concubine. That's the only other thing we ever hear about it, but I'm sure there's more to the story than that. So Jacob has these 12 sons in Paddan Aram, according to this tradition. And finally he gets to Mamre, which is where? Hebron. You see my map. At Kiryat Arba. The Jews now call their settlement in Hebron Kiryat Arba. It's in the hills around Hebron, and the Jews and the Arabs fight. There was massacres of synagogues in Hebron in the 1920s under the British mandate there. And all the Jews living there were killed. And now the Jews returned after the 6-Day War, and now the Arabs don't want them there anymore, and the Jews won't leave. And the religious Jews, because it's Abraham's city, feel very strongly about that, and they want to be able to visit Abraham's tomb, and there's all kinds of conflict there. If the UN had anything to say about it, they kick all the Israelis out of there. But the UN doesn't care about religious books. The UN only cares about how many nations are behind a certain book. So if you've got 100 nations on your side and only 2 on the other side, obviously you're going to win the vote. That doesn't mean that that's an understanding vote or a just vote or anything. It's just politics. It's not, that's why I personally have no respect for the UN or any feeling that the UN can do anything that, to my mind, is of any great worth. I'm afraid I'm one of those conservatives in that regard. Used to, when I was young, have high regard for the UN, but I have no respect. So I know how they see things. So anyway, he gets back to Isaac at Kiryat Arba. Isaac is 180 years old, and he died. You see, he doesn't how much do we know about Isaac? Gets a wife, Rebecca, has this problem with his children. Jacob goes away. When he gets back, his father's already about to die. And they buried him, presumably in Machpelah in Hebron. So since he's dead and Esau was mentioned, so we'll go through Esau's descendants, chapter 36. Esau married a woman of Canaan. I thought we heard before he went and married a woman of Ishmael's family. Here's a different tradition, but you see what I mean? Here's a different tradition. He's got a wife. I'm sure if you look back, you'll say that he married someone from Ishmael's family. If you look back earlier. Esau was angry at his father and went and married someone from Ishmael. Or his mother, he was angry at. So this is a different genealogical line. Look at this. Holabama. I think maybe Alabama might be named after that person. I'm not sure, but I have a feeling it might, unless it's an Indian name. Holabama. Of Elon the Hittite. Ada, the daughter of Elon the Hittite. The Hittites weren't even presumably in the country yet, so we have some contradictions there. And we get a person called Ruel here, line 5. He's going to pop up in the Moses story in Sinai, but he's also going to be another name for, it's very complicated. Hobab, Ruel, they're all different traditions. These names are not known even to the narrators in any solid fashion. They slip around. Well, for instance, we have a guy called Nebaot, line 4. Nebaot is really the name that scholars used to give the Arabs in Petra, the Nabatean Arabs. Is from this name Nebaot here, I think. Never mind. So he went to live in Seir, which, as I told you, really meant hair across the Jordan. And therefore he settled Edom. I think we've had this tradition somewhat before. We had some earlier. I can't go back and find it for you. And again, Amalek is one of his children, 12. Ruel, 10. Korah is part of some of the stories we get later on. So what the Israels know about Seir is all given here. And you can read all these names. They're very old genealogies. So these are neighboring genealogies of related peoples who are not anymore part of Israel. So, one I think is interesting is this, I work in the scrolls, Bela, son of Beor, line 32. In Edom there ruled a king or someone called Bela, son of Beor. Zerah, who later turns up, I think, as one of Judah's descendants, Perez and Zerah. Anyway, there could be just a repetition of names that happen. I can't even begin to decipher these genealogies. Line 37. Again, that genealogy looks like a Yahweh genealogy. Although the way it says it, here are the chiefs of Esau. Here are the descendants of, no, maybe it's Elohim. Here are the kings that ruled the land of Edom before an Israelite king ruled. You see, they know that this is before an Israel. They're writing this after an Israelite king ruled, like on line 31. So this is written later. So this could be priestly, actually. Could be a priestly. This is the story of Joseph. That sounds like this is the generations, heaven and of earth, when they were created. These are the generations of Noah. Again, it sounds like that priestly Elohist line. And this story has been spliced together. Let's look at it. I want to hurry because I want to get through the Joseph story before we finish tonight, so we can have an exam going up to the end of this. So, his brothers were out shepherding, line 2. Joseph was 17. And Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he was the son of his old age. You see, Benjamin, the son of his days, but it looks like that's Benjamin. In any case, whatever, the point is that he gives him a many-colored coat. That's a famous coat. And Jacob is one of these little nasty, not nasty, but, you know, wise guy little kids. He's 17, he should be a little smarter than this. Seems like he's about 12 or something, not 17. But anyway, he's a, you know, he's a teen, he's a, you know. He has these dreams, and he sees the sheaves serving him, and he interprets it that it's his brothers serving him, bowing down to him. So his brothers say, "You want to be king over us?" And they hated him, not only because of his coat, but because of the dreams he had. And then he had another dream, line 10. "I saw the sun, the moon, and 11 stars bowing down to me." By the way, people can really be happy. We're almost at 11 planets now. So maybe we're getting there, because the number of planets is expanding according to the new discovery. You may even be there. I haven't kept track of all. He told his father and his brother, and his father said, "Oh, God, you should tell people dreams like this." This sounds like a Yahweh story, even though it's got a lot of Elohist material in it. So the two have been sort of superimposed on each other. So his brothers were up north in Shechem. That's quite a ways. And his father's down in Hebron, line 14. And he goes up north. And he finds his brothers up there. Now this is really interesting. Here we can see the splicing, and I really want you to pay attention here. "Here comes the man of dreams," they said. "Look, let's kill him and throw him into the well." Watch how this story is spliced, like the Noah story. We can say that a wild beast, 20, devoured him. In Hebrew, that's Taraf Yosef. It's very poetic. Taraf, the wild beast tore him apart. Tore Joseph apart. Taraf Yosef. Then we'll see what becomes of his dreams. Now in this line, Reuben wants to stop things, and he's the oldest son. So this is a pro-Reuben story in the sense that Reuben is the one who tries to salvage the situation. Look, don't shed blood. Throw him into this well. That would be better, but don't do murder. And he wanted to really restore him to his father, according to the narrator here. So, okay, they took him, they pulled his coat. It's a very tender story. They ripped it up. Everyone knows this story. And they threw him into an empty well, just as Reuben had told them, and they sat down to eat. Now, that's one little storyline. Now the narrator, these two storylines have obviously agreed with each other up to this point, just like the Noah story, but now they've clipped it from a different narrative line, and they don't want to throw anything away, you see? So now they've clipped this into it. Looking up, you see this? They saw a group of Ishmaelites who were coming from Gilead. Ishmaelites, we would have to consider them tradesmen by this time. Their camels laden with all these balsam, resins, and different things going down to Egypt. And look who's the hero of this line, Judah. Judah is a progenitor of the south. Reuben is the oldest tribe of the north. So this is a pro-Judah line. This is the Judeans retelling the story, saying, look, it's not your ancestor that tried to stop it. Our ancestor did. And Judah said to his brothers, "What do we gain by killing our brother and covering up his blood?" Well, that's just what Reuben had already said. "Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites. But let's not harm him." Now, most people put all this together. But it isn't all together. It's two separate narrative lines. And his brothers agreed. Snip that off right there. 25 to 27. Start with 28. That goes back to 24. Just like the Noah material here. Now, some Midianite merchants were passing. See, Midianites and Ishmaelites are, one's descended from the others, are virtually the same. So the other line says, now some Midianite merchants were passing, and they drew Joseph out of the well. That goes with the line when Reuben says, put him in a well, and they did. So Reuben wants to put him in a well, but he wants to go back later and get him out and take him home to his daddy. Now, clip that off, start again. His brothers agreed. They sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites. This other line has that they're selling Joseph to the... So each sentence, one is cut from one narrative, the other cut from the other narrative. And it brings contradictions to the story. Once you unsplice it, the contradictions disappear, because you see you have two parallel stories. one with Judah as hero. So pay attention. One has Judah as hero, one has Reuben, not hero, but trying to stop the situation. One has the Ishmaelites. The Ishmaelites are the one with Reuben as the hero. The other has the Midianites. That's the one with Judah as the hero. But Judah says, come, let us sell him. No, wait a second. The one with the Midianites is the Reuben story. The one with Ishmaelites is the Judah story. Now we're getting confused. Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites. His brothers agreed. Now the Midianites drew Joseph from the well. That's the Reuben story. They sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites. Now, if you're reading it, you think the Midianites sold him to the Ishmaelites. No. The brothers sell him to the Ishmaelites in the Judah line story. So you have, Judah says, sell him to the Ishmaelites. Okay, they sold him to the Ishmaelites. That's line 28 and 29 for 20 pieces of silver. They took Joseph to Egypt. Okay, clip it back. When Reuben went back to the well, see, Reuben knows they sold him to the Ishmaelites. No, he doesn't, because it's a different storyline. When Reuben went, but that goes with line 28. Now, some Midianite merchants were passing. They drew Joseph out of the well. Skip 29. Then go to the end of 29 and 30. When Reuben went back to the well, there was no sign of Joseph. That's all part of the Reuben line. You see that? It's pretty clear when you can see it, but you wouldn't see it when you're reading it yourself. Someone has to point it out to you. Otherwise, you'd be totally befuddled. I didn't see it. But when you see it, it's obvious. That's what people like Friedman are writing about in that book. Anyway, so Reuben goes back and says, oh my God, what am I going to do? Anyway, at this point, both stories converge again. They took Joseph's colt, they slaughtered some creature, they put blood on it, and his father wept. Very, very tender story. And then it ends, line 36. Meanwhile, the Midianites had sold him into Egypt to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials. So, hold on. That goes on back to 28. The Midianites drew Joseph out of the well, and they sold him into Egypt. Where does the Ishmaelite story end? I'm not sure that we have the end. Oh, yeah, chapter 39, look. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, 1 and 2. Potiphar, the Egyptian, one of Pharaoh's officials. The other one has Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, command of the guard. One of Pharaoh's, and command, okay, that's the same. Brought him from the Ishmaelites, who brought him down there. That's the other story. Nothing. Yahweh was, and that now I think you see is a Yahweh story. It's a Judah story, you see. Judah, Ishmael, Yahweh. That's the Yahweh. The other is Jacob, Midianites, Israel. Now, north-south stories of the same amount. Mostly agreeing. Then in the middle, because Judah is involved, we get this 38, a snippet of Judah being a nasty person, fornication-wise, turning aside, sleeping with his son's wife that we already told you about, Tamar, the wife of many of his sons, and that'll interrupt it. And then 39, so that's an anti-Judah story told by somebody. Again, probably the Northerners telling a nasty story about the Southerners. The Judahites wouldn't have preserved that story. They don't want to hear a story like that about their father. Anyway, and then we'll take a break now. After the break, we'll be able, I think, to do the Joseph story, don't you think? So we'll be able to get to the end of this, hopefully, and that'll set us up for our exam next week. Okay? Okay. We'll talk about that after the break. Thanks for being patient. My friend here got me off the subject, but maybe it wasn't.